And there is the live stream. It says right there, you're live. So we must be. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the pre-show. We have 10 minutes before we get started in our live stream today. I'm just getting things ready. Today is our 220-1101 Core 1 A+ study group. Our last Core 1 A+ study group of the year of 2024. It is difficult to believe. It's difficult to figure out. Let's check and make sure things look good here. They do. Graphics are set up. Our recordings are going here. Looking at our cache numbers, those look very good. 3% is exactly what we want. And we are sending YouTube approximately 6 megabits per second in this particular view of things. Look at all these wires back here. What happened? Something happened. Something awful happened with wires. We got to straighten up this set of things. There is a good bit of things we are working on changing here, updating, moving around, etc., etc., etc. So during the holiday season will be a time when I'm doing some forklift upgrades. One of them is down here. You can even, there's a new component. There's a new thing down here. So we're not quite ready to turn that on yet. It is obviously turned on, but it's not connected to anything yet. We've got that happening. I'm considering swapping out my mixer too. I have some ideas of what I'd like to do with that. I got a lot of research to do. A lot of work to do there. I wonder if I can rent a mixer. That would be interesting. Whenever I'm planning to replace a camera, there's a lot of places on the internet that will rent out high-end photography equipment and really even low-end photography equipment for that matter. And I will usually rent a camera that I'm looking at. I'll usually rent it because the cameras that we use for this are, well, they're just expensive. And I'd rather not buy it and then it not work in some way. And then trying to return such a expensive piece of equipment is at sometimes problematic. So I often will rent a camera. I have a new camera rental I'm planning to receive on, I think it's Friday. And we're going to play with it this weekend, make sure it works okay. And if everything works okay with that, it's a camera and a lens. And if that works out, then that's the one we'll get. We'll update our camera. We'll hook it up to our new video switcher. And who knows, for the new year, we might have, to you, it will look exactly the same. Everything will look the same. But on my side, it will be so much easier. Hello, everyone in the chat room. Thanks for checking in. Thank you for being here from Grand Prairie, Texas, and Las Vegas, Nevada, and Reno. Nevada's checking in pretty strong. There's Dayton, Ohio. We have folks that are filing in. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for carving out a little bit of time for us. We're going to get started here in about 6.5 minutes as I watch the camera and I'm watching what's in front of me, but I'm watching it on the camera. Couldn't I just look over at it? Why would I do that? That's how dedicated I am, is I watch everything through the little screen. It's up here. I could see the little image of everything that I'm doing. That's what I should be monitoring. Hello, Puerto Rico and Minneapolis, Minnesota. There's Manchester and Houston. Thanks for being here. For those of you that are getting settled, you might even want to pop open a new browser window and head over to professormesser.com/QA. And that will get you to the screens that we will be using to ask the questions in this first hour. And then the second hour, I open up the chat or the Q&A. It's really already open. That same link, it's right down here. That link also has a Q&A that you can submit at any time. So if you have a question that you would like me to answer during that second hour, that's where you slide it in there. We got folks checking in from Houston. It's one day closer. We got Ontario, Canada. Our friends in Hamilton are there. We've got Saudi Arabia and Hungary and Denver. Uganda is here. Thank you for checking in. Philly is here. That would be Philadelphia for the rest of us. And we've got London. London. We aren't sure which London. Well, I think we know which London. Thanks for being here. Thanks for checking in. We got Saskatchewan checking in. I wonder if my family there is doing well. They are in Canada. This is the time of year where we like to FaceTime with our family from Canada, from here at our headquarters in Florida. Maybe a face-to-face isn't really the best time of the year. My blood is super thin. I don't do well to extreme cold. 50 degrees Fahrenheit, that's extreme cold. So we have to wrap the pipes. Florida, we have a different perspective of what cold is. We've had a cold snap this last few days where it got down to 45. So that's about as much as we can tolerate. Everything else we just have to layer up and bundle ourselves and walk around, and we'll be okay. So for those of you that are in the colder climates, you are better than me, just so you're aware. And I'm completely fine with that. 4 minutes to go before we get started. Thanks for being here, everyone. We've got all new questions, obviously. We do new questions every time. And we got a lot to go through. It's a busy time of the year, just in general. Here in the U.S., we just had our Thanksgiving, so the family was at our house. People were flown in. People drove in. It was a whole thing. And so we enjoyed that. We're sort of recovering. This is the recovery week for all of that. And then something will change, obviously, at that point. We'll go into Christmas mode. We'll go into holiday mode. And where I am here in Orlando, it gets a little bit crazy with busy times for all the people that like to come and visit us, which we appreciate, by the way. But it is busy. But it's busy in a good way, I think. But you'll notice that this week we're doing Core 1A Plus on Monday, Core 2A Plus on Friday. So I'm getting both of these done in those two places. And then the second week of December, next week, we are doing Network Plus on Tuesday and Security Plus on Thursday. So all of our live streams will effectively be done next week. That will give me the rest of the month to get all of the holiday things in order. That is a big thing. That is a lot to do. And so that clears up my schedule just a wee bit, just a little touch of some spare time, a little bit of breathing room, but not always. We'll have to figure out what's going on there. Hey, Malk, thanks for joining us. Good to see you again. Hope things are going well in St. Vincent down there. And it's been kind of a quiet season. I hope the flooding has gotten a lot better. Maybe it's cleared out a bit by now. Do that. Do I offer in-person classes? Nope. This is it. This is about as in-person as we get. This is the only live type class that, if you want to call it that. It's not really a class. It's more of us hanging out and asking questions and figuring out the details. But no, I don't have a course that you can attend or anything like that. Sorry. But of course, my entire course is available to watch for free online. So that's what I think is the better way to work on that. And we've got a lot that we're working on as far as course materials. Amongst the changes going on with the studio and changing equipment out and modifying things and sort of making the process a bit more streamlined on this end. I'm trying all kinds of different things, and we, of course, have new content there. Is the free online one that we recorded 4 or so years ago, is that most up-to-date? If it says the 2201101 or the 2201102, those are the ones that are the most up-to-date, yes. I don't know if I recorded 4 years ago. I guess that's probably closer to 3 years ago, but those are the most recent. The way that CompTIA works is with those version numbers. So the 2201101 and the 2201102, those are the newest versions. And if whatever you have, if all of your training materials have those numbers on them, you have the most recent things. And if you're trying to figure out if it is the most recent, just watch the first video of the course, and I explain all of that again, I guess. So it gives you a place to at least confirm that and sync everything up. All right, we got a few seconds here before we get started. Let's get Keynote going. Let's get a green light. We got a green light. I like it. All right, that is running. We can put this over here. We can get that ready to go. And look at that, everybody. It is top of the hour. It's time to do a live stream. Let's do one, shall we? Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the December 2024 Professor Messer 220-1101 Core 1 A+ Study Group. My name's James Messer. I will be your host for this next couple of hours of Q&A. In our first hour, I will ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And in the second hour, I have questions from you that I will answer. We'll talk about how you can participate and answer those questions. If you indeed are here and you are live, you can submit a question at any time. Simply visit the URL that's on your screen right now, professormesser.com/QA. That is one single link you need to go to that will have connections for the questions that I will be asking in the first hour and the questions that you can submit in the second hour. There is an app on the App Store, but it effectively takes you to a web page. It's not very useful the way that app works. It used to be a full-blown app. Now it just goes to the web page where everything is there. I guess in a way that's better. That way we can have everything updated. But that makes it very easy for you if you are working along the lines of answering some of these questions. Well, to get us started, I have a question that I asked last month just to see if you're able to get to that particular link. Let's see how you do with this. I call this my rewind question. And if you visit that link, it asks, a server has crashed due to a memory error it identified, but was not able to correct. Which of the following would best describe the memory in this system? Now, there are a number of answers that are here. Our standing rule is that you can answer these, but only answer by visiting the link that is on your screen. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. That'll be the standing rule for the duration of this live stream. The possible answers are parity, DDR5, solid state, multi-channel, or ECC. So if you think you know the answer, visit the link on your screen, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. And we will come back to this question in just a bit. Well, thank you so much for being here. We do one of these live streams for the Core 1 and the Core 2 every month. Our Core 1 live stream is today, which is a little bit different day than we normally do. This doesn't matter if you're watching on the replay, of course, but normally we don't do these on a Monday. So hopefully you're not having a case of those. We also have scheduled a Friday live stream, which is also something we don't commonly do, but it's the end of the year and it's the holidays and the schedule has sort of fit those in at those times. Hopefully you can come back and join us on those days as well. If you would like to see what we are doing when we are not live, you simply type in professormesser.com/YouTube. You can visit and watch all of our videos out on our YouTube channel. And if you wanted to subscribe, which would be a lovely thing for you to do, you can do it at that link. We also have our daily A+ pop quiz questions. They are available at professormesser.com/Twitter or professormesser.com/Instagram or professormesser.com/LinkedIn. You simply type in professormesser.com/ the name of the site you would like to find me on. And hopefully it will find me on those. And if you're on a site where I am not, please let me know. And I'll at least add some links to those as well. Sometime in this first hour, I will give you information and instructions on how you can earn a 1-hour webinar category CEU by simply watching this. Now, if you haven't earned your A+ certification or you don't have a certification yet, this obviously won't apply to you. But if you are here after earning your A+ Network Plus Security Plus or a number of other certifications, this might be useful. Just listen in during the first hour and I'll tell you everything that you need to know. Today, we're going to talk about questions that come from the exam objectives for the 220-1101 exam. This was an exam that was released on April the 20th of 2022. Since these tend to last about 3.5 years, that means that this version of the exam is probably going to retire around October or November of 2025. We don't know exactly when the retirement dates are quite yet. CompTIA will ultimately tell us. The important thing to keep in mind, though, if you are studying for your A+ certification, this is the version you should be studying. So don't worry, you've got plenty of time to finish your studies before these exams are retired on October of 2025. And even then, I don't know if it's going to be a huge difference whenever you get to the next update, whenever that seems to happen in the world of CompTIA. We can talk about that in the after show if you'd like. If you have questions about next versions or planning or figuring out how you should strategize your scheduling, that would be a good place to ask. You can always go to professormesser.com/QA and ask your question in the tab there. The exams, both of these exams that you have to pass, are 90 minutes in length. You need to earn a 675 on the Core 1. That's on a scale from 100 to 900. And you need to do a little bit better on the Core 2. The number is a 700 that you need to earn on that same scale between 100 and 900. Now, even though the exam is retiring about a year from now, the exam, once you pass these two exams, you're locked in with this certification for 3 years. Once you get certified, it doesn't really matter what they do with the question pool. You're certified. The idea of exams changing is not very important for you. So the important part is that you get both of them passed before they are retired. And once you pass that second exam, you are certified for 3 years, and you can continue to renew that certification without having to take the exams again. So this probably will be the only time that you ever take the A+ exams once you become certified. The two exams themselves cover different topics. The topics we will cover today are for the 2201101. This is our Core 1 study group. So we will be discussing mobile devices, networking, hardware, virtualization and cloud computing, and hardware and network troubleshooting. On Friday, we have our Core 2 study group, and we'll cover the other topics later in the week. So if you're studying for both of those, you might want to come back on Friday for our next live stream, or at least watch for the replays on our YouTube channel. I have videos available for replay immediately after we're done. When I hit the stop button, it takes a couple of minutes for YouTube to process the video, and then it's available for you to watch automatically. There's nothing I have to do on my end. If you would like an audio-only podcast version of this live stream, I do make one of those available. I have to do a little bit of work to get that done, but it's not too difficult. You'll find that at professormesser.com/podcast, or go to your favorite podcast listening site. If you're on a site that is streaming audio like Spotify, you just search for Professor Messer. All of our podcasts are there as well. You can grab any of them on demand and listen in. You'll also notice that sometime over the next day or so, that timestamps that have breakdowns of everything we do today will almost like magic appear in the YouTube video description. It's obviously not magic. It's my marketing manager, Lori, who's watching this in the replay. Hey, Lori. She's going through probably at 2x speed and typing in all of these timestamps so that we can get it exactly correct on the YouTube video description, something that might help you if you're planning to look for specific information across any of the live streams that we've done over the previous years, something that can really be helpful. Also let you know very quickly, and once we're done here, we are still hanging out in our Discord. It's a great community of thousands of people that are there studying for their A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, and other industry certifications. They're there to not only answer questions, you can study with other people that are also planning to take their exams. You can open up your own study room and stream audio and stream video and be in complete control of that room. And then when you're done and you exit the room simply closes out. It's another great way that you can help study for the things that are important and have other people help you at the same time. Simply start one up. It's all you have to do. You don't even have to announce it. Just start up a room. People will see it happen and they'll suddenly join in. Very nice and a great community of folks there. Very smart people. And that's usually where I hang out as well. That's at professormesser.com/Discord. Eventually, you will need to take this exam. If you'd like to earn your certification, you'll need to take your Core 1 and your Core 2. There is a cost associated with taking these exams. So one of the things that we like to do is take a little bit of the pressure off by giving you a chance to have a discounted exam voucher. You could buy these same vouchers over at the CompTIA website for full price, or you could simply visit the professormesser.com site, professormesser.com/vouchers. It's a good place to go. That voucher site is available for folks that are in the US, the Canada, or US territory. So those vouchers are only available in those specific countries, at least at the moment. We also have a little bonus for you, something you can't get anywhere else. If you buy a voucher from that page, you get a free copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. This is a series of tips and tricks I put together based on my studies and my test taking of these same exams, things that can help you with the study process, and perhaps even more importantly, things that can help you during the exam itself. Taking the exam has a number of strategies that might get you a couple of extra points, and I try to document all of those in my Exam Hacks ebook. That's available for free when you purchase the voucher on my site at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to that question I asked earlier, which was a server has crashed due to a memory error it identified but was not able to correct. Which of the following would best describe the memory in this system? Would it be parity, DDR5, solid state, multi-channel, or ECC? Let's close the poll and see how you did with this one. 60% of you say the answer is parity, 21% say the answer is ECC, and then we have 6% for DDR5, 6% for multi-channel, and 4% for solid state. There is a number of different types of memory that you can run into in your system. If the system is able to identify an error but not able to correct the error, then it is using parity memory. This is one that at least is tracking the parity of these systems. And if the parity calculation doesn't work out, it knows that some bit was flipped somewhere along the way. It just is not able to correct it. If you want to correct it, you would need a different type of memory. You would need ECC memory. That's the error correction code memory. And that's not only able to identify an error, in some cases, it's able to correct the error, which is also something that can be very, very useful, especially for high-end servers, database servers, virtualization servers, cloud-based servers. Those are very important. We don't tend to see this type of memory on our desktop computers. It's just not something that is entirely necessary. But for our servers, this can be pretty useful. So if you answered the parity option at the very top, the 60% of you that answered that one got it absolutely correct. I'm glad that worked out okay. Hopefully that's given you some ideas of how to answer questions in here, and maybe you've also learned something about parity memory and ECC memory as well. Pretty useful. Let's see if we can now shift gears a little bit, because I would like to give you a new question. That's what we're here for. And as many of you know, if you've attended these live streams before, the first new question is a performance-based question. Now, if you've never taken a CompTIA exam before, that term may not be familiar to you. Most of us are familiar with multiple choice questions like the one we just had. There was a question and there were multiple options to choose from. But CompTIA knows that you could have guessed on this one. And in this particular case, with 5 answers, you had a 20% chance of getting this right, even if you didn't really know the answer. So CompTIA says, let's give you some questions on your exam that are not multiple choice. They could be fill in the blank. It could be a drag and drop question. They could put you at a command prompt. You might have to do something on the screen. You might have to put things in a particular order. It's really any other type of question than multiple choice. So I have for you, like we do with every live stream, I have a brand new performance-based question of the month. And the performance-based question of the month we have this time is, well, I guess online, it looks like a fill in the blank. But this is a question where I want you to identify these interfaces. And there are 4 interfaces on the screen. This is the back of a computer. So we want to be able to visually look at these interfaces on the back of a computer and immediately know what they happen to be. So you can see there is an interface A. That's the one that's right here. Interface B is here on the screen. Interface C and interface D. Please be as specific as you can with those. And you can put your questions in at professormesser.com/QA, which also helps a little bit if you're planning to work through the details of this. Hopefully you have an idea of what some of these might be. I like it whenever I'm able to look at the back of a system and know immediately what this happens to be. And that's an important thing for your exam as well. It's also very useful for you to be able to see this. So you can submit your question at any time. Go to professormesser.com/QA. As always, of course, please, no answers in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. You want to use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your answer. Maybe this is one you've seen before. This is the back of a computer. If I look at this picture, I'm not the one that made this picture, but if I look at the back of this computer, I want to say that's an Asus motherboard, and I think that's correct. Somebody can spot me in the chat room. I think that's probably correct. And there's a number of interfaces on here I didn't ask about. I will go through all of the interfaces on this one. I think I can do that. Relatively straightforward. We'll figure out the details. We'll take some of the graphics off the screen and figure out what might be there. And we'll step through each one of these. Some of these interfaces, though, are not listed in the CompTIA exam objectives. So this is the one that we're really focusing on, all of the interfaces that are surrounded with the yellow box. Those are the only ones I'd like you to know is A, B, C, and D. And there are some others here we might step through just to be interesting to see what they are, so that if you do run across this motherboard or a similar one like this, you will be able to know what those are used for. And that might be pretty useful too. Number of you have submitted your answers. You're already putting these in. I'm going to look over at the answers that you've submitted. Normally I don't do this, but I want to see how well you're answering these, how well these are coming up. We're obviously just asking for the interface name on these. We don't necessarily know what those interfaces will be used for. Some of you are filling the blanks as well. So I think that's kind of nice to be able to have that particular insight into what this might be. Let's step through each one of these. It's a gigabyte motherboard. Okay, I'm fine with that. It's actually a relatively new one from a motherboard perspective, and we'll find out why that's the case right now. Let's step through each of these interfaces and see what they happen to be. We'll start with interface A that we have on our screen. This interface has a kind of a longer connection on the top and a smaller connection on the bottom. It looks to be symmetrical, which means that it has the same style on the left and right. And for those of you that have plugged in any type of video equipment recently and ever worked through the details of what these might be, we know that that is a very common one. It's on our televisions, it's on our monitors, and it's on our systems that plug directly in. It's an HDMI connection. So we know immediately what that one happens to be. Pretty common to also see that when we start looking at consumer electronics equipment, not just computers. It's not specific to the computing environment. Next on our list, this is the reason I said this must be a relatively new motherboard, and that relatively new motherboard because it has not only one type of USB connection, has really multiple types of USB connections on here. This is a relatively new USB connection because it's a USB-C connection. USB-C is one that is the interface type. It's a physical description of the interface. There are different types of signals that can be sent through a USB-C connection. For example, it could be a USB-C serial interface connection, just like USB, just like any type of, you're plugging in a mouse or a keyboard that uses USB as the signaling type. It's connected to a USB-C interface. That is also the interface used for other types of signals. For example, I have many USB-C connections on the back of my computer that I use here in the studio. The computer that I have in front of me has not just USB connections that are connected via USB-C, but also Thunderbolt connections over USB-C. So some of the newer standards for Thunderbolt specifically uses USB-C as the standard interface type. So it's always good if you have a motherboard like this. And I intentionally photoshopped all these had names on every single one of these pictures. So I intentionally photoshopped the name right off of it. So we don't know what that particular standard was for this one. I suspect it's USB, but it could be a Thunderbolt connection as well. And some interfaces can obviously do both. On the C connection up here at the top, relatively large compared to the others that are here on the screen. And that is one that is very standardized. This type of connection is one that if you were working through the details of basically the back of any standard desktop system, we very commonly see an Ethernet connection on the screen. That Ethernet connection is commonly connecting through an RJ45 jack. RJ45 is one of the most common copper connections for Ethernet. Not the only copper connection we use these days for Ethernet, but it is so standardized and such a common configuration that that's commonly what we will see. It's what most of our home-based equipment and the equipment we use in most companies are connecting over gigabit Ethernet using these RJ45 connections. And then last, I have this D interface. We know that we have USB-C as this smaller connection. This motherboard, though, supports other types of USB. That's a USB Type A connection. And in this case, you can see there are multiple Type A connections on this motherboard, some that are colored with this black color, some that are yellow, and some that are red. That's not just to keep it in an interesting color scheme. Each of those is designated with a different color to show the different USB standards that are used for those. So, for example, you can have a USB-A like these over here that are the older USB standard. You have the yellow and red that are the newer USB standards. So if you're plugging in a keyboard, you might not want to plug it into the faster interfaces. You might want to use those for plugging and connecting in external storage, for example. The mouse and keyboard need much lower bandwidths, and so you can use the slower USB connections that happen to be there. These colors don't necessarily designate back to a specific USB standard. In this particular case, this motherboard manufacturer has done that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the same color with the same standard across different motherboards. They tend to be that way, but it doesn't always work that way. So always check the documentation of the motherboard or your system that you happen to be using to see what specific standard is used for that specific color. So that's the idea. Some of these might have different capabilities as well. It depends on the motherboard manufacturer and how they've implemented and engineered this particular device. Now, I mentioned on this screen that there were other connections that we could look at. So I'm going to get rid of some of this stuff that I have on the screen. I'm going to sort of in real time, I'm going to do some quick editing. And we're gonna see how well this works. What's the worst that can happen, right? It's only a live stream. So I'm gonna go to my live stream here and I'm going to, there we go, get this back up and running. Let's look at this motherboard now. I wish I had the actual picture on here. You know, I think I might have the original picture that we could look at. I don't know if I do or not, but why don't we look? Since we're here, since we're hanging out, do I have this? I do not. Because that would have made too much sense, wouldn't it? For me to be that prepared for this particular, I bet I do somewhere, or I deleted it. Which is certainly a possibility as well. But let's look at this same view without this on the screen. Here we go with this one. Here it is. Here it is with none of the things that are in the way. There were a couple of interfaces here, though, that we did not put on that list, primarily because it's not part of the exam objective. So this is not on the objective list. So let's have a look at this. We mentioned the USBs, so that was there. There were these copper connections. You can kind of see them here. And if we look closely, it looks like they are threaded with a coax connection. So we see this single piece of copper in the middle, and that is connected with this, looks like something you would twist on. Those are connections for external wireless antenna. So we can plug in a couple of wireless antenna here onto the back of this desktop computer, and we can connect that and have connectivity to all of our wireless networks that we might be using. And we have others on the right side. We didn't mention these either. These are all for audio. We have TRS connections that are here, probably for a 5x1 or some type of other recording system. So you might have a left channel or right channel, a center channel. One of these might be an input for a microphone. You got other options to choose there. And then there is another SPDIF connection, SPDIF. That is something also not in the latest version of the A+ exam, but that is commonly used for an optical output for audio, so you can have the best sounding output for that particular connection. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the different connectors you would run into. This is, by the way, a very useful task to go through if you're someone who is trying to determine if you know all of these interfaces or not. Just go out to Google and do an image search on Google of the back of a desktop computer or motherboard interfaces, and it will pop up a lot of interfaces. And it will commonly tell you what motherboard that happens to be. You can then download the manual for that motherboard. Most motherboard manuals have a block diagram that show you all of the interfaces. It puts a label on each of those and tells you what that interface happens to be. That's a very easy, inexpensive, and very useful and efficient way to study some of those interface types. So I would recommend you go through those. But hopefully that's given you an idea of the interfaces you will run into. A was an HDMI interface. B was USB-C. The third interface here was an RJ45 used for Ethernet. And the last interface was a USB Type A or USB-A. We tend to call it USB-A these days because we have USB-C. I guess the full name, though, is a USB Type A. These names have changed a bit over the years, something that we have used over time. Hopefully you got some of those right. Most of you, I flipped through a few of the answers that were coming in, and many of you did extremely well with that one. So very nice that you had at least some concept of what some of those might be and some of the newer interfaces as well. That was your performance-based question of the month. Hopefully that's given you something to work on. Let's now do another question that we have. This next question asks, a technician has installed a new monitor, but they notice a persistent single black pixel near the middle of the screen. Which of the following would be the best way to fix this issue? Would it be to update the video driver, modify the refresh rate, power cycle the display, replace the monitor, or change the default resolution? Got a few options there. As always, of course, if you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, you want to follow the link that's on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. The question again asks, a technician has installed a new monitor, but they notice a persistent single black pixel near the middle of the screen. Which of the following would be the best way to fix this issue? Would it be to update the video driver, modify the refresh rate, power cycle the display, replace the monitor, or change the default resolution? Again, lock in your answer. Visit professormesser.com/QA, and you can lock all of that down. Let's see if you happen to know what the best option might be. Whenever you're working through solving these types of problems, it's important to know what your first, your second, or third method might be. In this case, we're asking which of the options here would be the best way to fix this issue. There might be a way that you think you might be able to fix this issue, but it's not listed here. Well, if it's not listed here, that obviously can't be one of the answers. The question very specifically says, of the list of things that are available to you, and it's these 5 things, which one do you choose? This is a common challenge on the exam, that it wants you to answer the best possible answer given what's available to you. And one of the things that you will notice whenever you start working through challenges like this and finding ways to at least understand what they're asking of you, you'll get more accustomed to this idea of less than, better than, and sort of breaking out the different options that are available in the list. So hopefully this is one that you have run into and that you're familiar with. See if you know what these are. I think some of you have stepped through challenges like this before, and I can tell because of the number of people very quickly answering this particular question. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asked, a technician has installed a new monitor, but they notice a persistent single black pixel near the middle of the screen. Which of the following would be the best way to fix this issue? Would it be update the video driver, modify the refresh rate, power cycle the display, replace the monitor, or change the default resolution? Let's see how you answered this one. We will stop our poll and we will see that 52% of you say you should replace the monitor. 18% said to power cycle the display. 12% said update the video driver. And then we have single digits. 8% say change the default resolution, and 7% say to modify the refresh rate. This is an interesting challenge because this may be something that you've run into with what we call a dead pixel. This is a display with a dead pixel. I don't know if you can see the pixel very well. It's right here under the red bar that we have on our screen. And you can see that pixel is just black. There we can zoom up on it there. It is a pixel that is always going to be black. It doesn't matter what we do, the pixel's black. It never changes color. It never changes to anything else. You can do all different things to try to get that pixel to light up in some way, and it simply will not ever light up. This is a hardware error. This is a hardware failure. It's not something that you can fix by replacing a cable or restarting the display or updating any type of software. This is something that is part of the display itself. Now, obviously, maybe it isn't part of the display. You want to be sure maybe that nothing has got onto the display that you could easily clean off. Obviously, that could be an issue. Something got stuck to the monitor when you installed it. You might want to clean off whatever happens to be there. But it should be relatively easy as long as you're very careful with these LCD displays, because they can be broken by pushing on them. So we don't want to do that, but we do want to make sure there's nothing on the screen itself. So get a soft cloth, just make sure nothing is there, and you can't really wipe that off. This is a dead pixel. It's something that you cannot fix. To be able to solve this problem, you will have to replace the monitor. There's no way around this one. It's a hardware failure. There's no other option here other than swapping out this display for one that doesn't have this dead pixel. Now, if you were to look at manufacturers and what they've done with these displays and their dead pixels, you may find that some manufacturers feel that a certain number of dead pixels is okay. And they may say, we're not going to swap this out. It's not a warranty repair. Our policy is that 2 dead pixels is okay. This might be something you want to check on before you purchase the monitor and see what their policy might be for dead pixels. Because if you happen to get one and the pixel is in the middle of the screen or a place that you commonly work, that one dead pixel may be 1 pixel too many, and you might want to swap this out. Some display manufacturers say, nope, we'll swap it out. If it's a dead pixel, we'll swap it out and give you a new monitor and we're good. So it just depends. Make sure you understand what happened with this pixel and what the problems might be. Indeed, in this particular case, let me switch this around. In this particular case, this one is a hardware problem. And so if you look at all the possible answers that are on the screen, updating the video driver doesn't fix any bad hardware, so that would not be the right answer. Power cycling the display, it's a hardware problem. You can turn it off and back on again, but it's simply going to do the same thing every single time. We also have changing the default resolution as a software change, doesn't change those dead pixels on the display. Modifying the refresh rate is also a software change, doesn't modify anything with the hardware on that display, which leaves us the only option we have available, which would be to swap out the monitor. Replacing that monitor is the right answer. That's what we were looking for, and 52% of you answered that one. Absolutely correct. You want to swap out that particular monitor. Let's do another question. I've got one for you. This one, it asks this question. A user in the marketing department would like to add an @hotmail.com address to their mobile device. Which of the following configurations would be the best choice? Would it be iCloud, POP3, Gmail, IMAP, or Outlook.com? A user in the marketing department would like to add a hotmail.com address to their mobile device. Which of the following configurations would be the best choice? Would it be iCloud, POP3, Gmail, IMAP, or Outlook.com? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. This is a question that popped into our chat over the last couple of weeks, and that often gives me some ideas for questions that I could ask during the live stream. And this is one of those you would run into. Very often when we have our mobile devices, our phones and our tablets that we're using in the workplace, that individual device may not be owned by the company. It may be a user-owned device that the company is simply able to use. And there are ways to designate different areas of that device, and so that you're able to use part of that device for personal use and part of that device for office or work use. And both of those sides are completely partitioned from each other. There are, of course, cases where that means that we'll want to load up our corporate email on the device, but a user might also want to have their personal email on the device. So we need to know how that would happen. And this is one that is certainly ripped from our Discord at professormesser.com/Discord. This is one where someone was asking a lot about this one. And I thought the history of this particular email address was an interesting one as well. A lot of you have answered this one. Let's see how you did. The question again asks, a user in the marketing department would like to add an hotmail.com address to their mobile device. Which of the following configurations would be the best choice? Would we configure iCloud, POP3, Gmail, IMAP, or Outlook.com? Let's stop the poll. 44% of you, not a majority, but a plurality of you, did choose Outlook.com. Just behind it at 35%, IMAP was a popular choice. 16% said POP3, and then we had 1% apiece for iCloud and for Gmail. Well, this is one that it's really not exactly obvious when you look at this particular answer. We have to know a little bit about the history of Hotmail.com. Hotmail.com is an odd name for email, isn't it? Hotmail, that's odd. It's really a name that was generated based on the markup language that we use for the web, HTML. And this particular mail system took HTML, expanded it out. Instead of having HTML mail, they said, we're going to make it Hotmail. And so it is a bit of a play on the acronym that created this particular name. And it became a very popular mail service, popular enough that Microsoft was able to acquire it and integrate it into their existing overall email services. I think you can see where I'm going with this, that because Microsoft is using Hotmail and has now integrated Hotmail into their overall email strategy, we have this as part of the Microsoft 365 type services. So if you're using Microsoft Outlook, for example, or you have your own Outlook Exchange server, or maybe you used a hosted Exchange service, we have the same configuration. This happens to be a screenshot from my phone that shows that I can configure iCloud, Microsoft Exchange, Google, Yahoo, AOL, Outlook.com, or other. This Outlook service for if you're running Exchange, you would obviously choose Exchange to be able to do this. But if you've got other services that you would like to be able to use, you would choose the service for you. So in this particular case, we have an Outlook.com service. And although Hotmail it's not the same word as Outlook. Those are two different words, but because Hotmail was integrated into the Microsoft email services, Outlook.com and Hotmail.com use that same connection when you are configuring an email service. So that is a very good example of where configuring the email setup on your mobile device may need to be specific to that particular provider's offerings. In this case, it would be a Microsoft offering because it is Hotmail, and we have in this case Outlook.com that we would be using to be able to configure that. So Outlook.com would be the best choice because it is so well integrated into all of their email systems. You don't have to use any type of additional protocols. It is fully functional. It has specific Microsoft integrations inside of it. It has its own method for authentication. So in this case, the best possible option would indeed be Outlook.com. Now, there are other choices you could have chosen. For example, you could have chosen IMAP. I believe IMAP is still an option that's available from hotmail.com or from Microsoft. Or if you go to hotmail.com these days, it just redirects you over to outlook.com anyway. So IMAP probably is still an option that you could use, but IMAP is not completely integrated into that particular outlook.com environment. It has its own method for authentication. It has its own method for modifying folders. It has its own method for synchronizing these emails. And because of that, it would not be the best choice. This is a very good example of how there could be multiple answers that you could use, but only one of these would be the best choice. And this is not uncommon if you happen to go you take your exam and you're looking at a question. This is not an uncommon strategy they use, where multiple answers here could be correct along with POP3. I'll bet Hotmail might even have a POP3 option as well. I know that Gmail still has one. So if you do that, you could choose 3 of these options. You could choose POP3, you could use IMAP, you could choose Outlook for all of these. And if you were having Hotmail be retrieved by Gmail and presented in a Gmail front end, you could technically also choose Gmail as the answer. So here it would be 4 of these could technically be used, but only one is the right answer, and that is indeed Outlook.com. iCloud used exclusively for Apple, so that doesn't apply to anything that happens to be in this question. The answer here that we were looking at is indeed Outlook.com, and 44% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. One of the things you probably noticed already as we've stepped through these questions is that there are a lot of different topics you need to know for your Core 1. We've looked at interfaces, we've talked about cloud configurations, we've looked at email settings for mobile devices, there's troubleshooting options we're dealing with. One of the things that is a bit of a challenge is that this means there's a lot to study. And if you were to look at our A+ course, 137 videos just to be able to encapsulate both the Core 1 and the Core 2 exams. Those are a lot of videos. And of course, I would love it if you watched every single one of those videos. I would think that would be great. And I encourage you to. But I realize there is this thing called physics and time, and not everybody has the time to be able to go through every single one of them. So one of the things that I've done is take all of the content from all of my training courses and every single video, and I put them into one single document. These are my course notes. These course notes are designed to give you all of the text, all of the charts, all of the important graphics that are in my course, my video courses. So you don't miss anything. They're all in here. You can see the breakdown of the port numbers. You can see interface configurations. You can see the different cables that you would use. They are all in this set of course notes. You're looking at the PDF version of the course notes right there. I also have a physical version, the book version of these course notes that you might be able to use. They are identical, of course, to the version that we have as a PDF, but this is also something that a little bit easier to carry around with you. You don't have to be have your computer out or your mobile device. In some cases, a little bit easier to read. If you purchase this version that is on paper, you also get the digital version for free. And so while you're waiting on this to be shipped over to you, you will be able to download and use the digital version and put it on all of your mobile devices and take it with you as well. These are my course notes. We have these available for both Core 1 and Core 2. We have bundles available so that you can get a little bit of a discount off of those. If you want more information on those, you can find it on our website at professormesser.com/1101notes, or you can simply follow the main menu on our site to find any of these. It's a great way to also support what we do here at professormesser.com. Let's do another question. This next question is a networking question that asks, a user is able to ping an IP address on their own subnet, but cannot ping any IP address outside of their local network. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be an incorrect, let me put me up here. There we go. Would it be an incorrect default gateway? Would it be that IPv6 is disabled? Would it be a duplicate IP address? Would it be an incorrect DNS address? Or would it be an incorrect date and time setting? You have a few options here to choose from. The question again asks, A user is able to ping IP addresses on their own subnet, but cannot ping any IP addresses outside of their local network. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be incorrect default gateway, IPv6 is disabled, duplicate IP address, incorrect DNS addresses, or an incorrect date and time setting? If you think you know the answer, visit our site. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Tell me what you think the answer is. With networking, it could be one of 100 things. I recognize that. But we only have 5 options here. We're working through the details of this. But only one of these options can really be the one causing the problem that we're looking at, or at least in this case, the most likely reason for this. If you think you know the answer, please go to the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You want to go to the link that's there on your screen and see if you know what the answer might be. I think some of you may be familiar with this kind of problem and being able to work through them. Maybe it's something that you've worked through and you're familiar with. So this would be a good place to go to figure out the details. A lot of people locking in their answer very quickly with this one too, which makes me think there might be a little bit more to work through than this particular question. Maybe this is one that you are familiar with. If you're someone who's worked through these questions before, you probably are familiar with what these things happen to be. See if you know the answer to this one as well. Let's see how you did. The question asks, a user is able to ping IP addresses on their own subnet, but cannot ping any IP addresses outside of their local network. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be an incorrect default gateway, IPv6 is disabled, duplicate IP address, incorrect DNS addresses, or an incorrect date and time setting? All of these can create challenges for you, but which one did you choose? Let's stop the poll and see how you did. 67%, a very strong showing, said an incorrect default gateway. We have 15% that said it's an incorrect DNS address. You've got also IPv6 disabled, got about the same percentage at 14%. And then we go down to very small single digits. 2% said a duplicate IP address, and less than 1% said an incorrect date and time setting. But is that really the most likely reason for this issue? So let's have a look at what we need to have configured on a system to have this system communicate properly. We first need an IP address, and this would be an IP address that nobody else has used. So this would be an IP address that is not being used by anybody else. It is a unique address that only you have on this particular local network. So make sure you are working through the details of that. I think if someone is also configuring an IP address, they want to make sure that the subnet mask is correct. This is a value that tells your local device what your local IP subnet happens to be. It uses this value to be able to understand if it is communicating off to a separate device and going outside of our local network, or if it's communicating inside of our local network. Now, that description sounds a lot like the problem that we're having. So if our subnet mask was incorrect, it could potentially cause a problem like this. But as you recall, an incorrect subnet mask was not one of the options here. So that's not one that we would run into either. There's a third variable, a third piece of information that's important when you're working for networking in IP version 4, and that is a default gateway IP address. That is the address that your system uses if it recognizes that you're trying to communicate to an IP address that is outside of your local IP subnet. And if you are trying to communicate with a device outside of your local subnet, then it needs to be routed through this IP address. If this IP address is wrong, or this IP address, that device, that default gateway is not working, you will not be able to communicate outside of your local network, which, by the way, sounds a lot like the problem that we're having. And indeed, an incorrect default gateway does describe exactly the situation that we have here, where we're able to communicate on our local network, but not able to communicate outside of our local network. That certainly points to a problem with our subnet mask, a problem with our default gateway, and in this particular case, The only one of those two things that's listed here is an incorrect default gateway, and 67% of you chose that option. But what about the other options that are here? Why would it not have been these others that happen to be here? An incorrect DNS address means that we would not be able to properly resolve an IP address based on the name of a device, a fully qualified domain name, an FQDN. A fully qualified domain name is the thing that we would normally type in a browser. For example, to go to my site, you type in www.professormesser.com. That's a fully qualified domain name. But how does your computer even know where that is on the internet? It's just a name. It doesn't point you anywhere. Behind the scenes, of course, there's a resolution that takes place. Your machine will ask your defined DNS server, I need to find www.professormesser.com. Do you know the IP address? It will respond back with the IP address, and your system will then communicate directly to my server. In this particular case, though, we're pinging IP addresses. We're not pinging a fully qualified domain name. DNS isn't even involved in this particular question because everything that we're doing deals specifically with an IP address. So in this particular case, even if the DNS address was incorrect, it would not be causing the problem that we happen to see here. It could cause other types of problems, certainly, but not the problem that's listed in this particular question. We have IPv6 being disabled got 14% of the vote. In this case, pinging IP addresses, we didn't specify what the IP type we were pinging was in this question. I didn't specifically say it was IP version 4, but if we were using IP version 6, we would not be able to ping any addresses on our own subnet. So we can take a few steps to figure out, wait, if it works here and it doesn't work there, doesn't mean the whole thing's disabled. And in fact, it could be IPv6. Let's even assume that this question is dealing with pinging IPv6 addresses. IPv6 being disabled mean it would not be able to ping addresses in our own subnet, which means this would not be the right answer either. In this case, I was thinking when I was writing it in an IP version 4 form, but I thought it'd be good to put IPv6 in here as well so we could step through that logic. And then we have the two that got single digits. 2% said a duplicate IP address. Duplicate IP addresses can certainly create problems for communication where you could communicate in some cases, but not others. But in this particular example, we're able to ping addresses on our own subnet, which seems to indicate that we don't have an IP address conflict. That's not an issue either. So a duplicate IP address is not the most likely reason for what we happen to be seeing, given the other options that are here. And then lastly, an incorrect date and time setting. You may think, what does that have to do with networking? And I guess in a pure sense, it really doesn't have much to do with networking. But if you are working on a network that uses things like Kerberos to be able to authenticate, so if you're on a Microsoft network, for example, and you're logging into the domain, your date and time needs to be relatively close to the date and time that is on your domain controller. That's because this Kerberos uses cryptography and sets these tickets up to provide the authentication, and it uses the date and time to validate the device that happens to be communicating with it. I think the default for Active Directory is a 5-minute window. So if your time and date is more than 5 minutes different than your Active Directory server, you won't be able to log in. Now, our problem here wasn't about logging in. It wasn't about Kerberos. It wasn't about a Microsoft network. We were simply pinging IP addresses, and because of that, incorrect date and time would not apply. The problem we have here, based on all of the 5 options we have here, the one that would indeed be the most likely reason is an incorrect default gateway, and 67% of you got that one absolutely correct. I think we have time for a couple more, so let's do another question on our list. This next question asks, 2 physical drives have failed in a RAID array, but the data in the array is still available to the users. Which of the following is used in this array? Is it RAID 0, RAID 5, RAID 1 plus 0, or RAID 1? These are the 4 RAID types we need to know for the A+ exam. This is obviously not every RAID type that's available in the world. There are many different RAID types. These are the 4 that you do need to know for the exam, however. The question again asks, 2 physical drives have failed in a RAID array, but the data in the array is still available to the users. Which of the following is used in this array? Is it RAID 0, RAID 5, RAID 1 plus 0, or RAID 1? If you think you know the answer, please visit our link to lock in your answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Please know answers in the chat room. Please know hints in the chat room. We want to step through these questions and see if we know what they are, and we'll lock it in, and then we'll see what everybody thinks the answers might be. And the question in the chat room, a good one. Will RAID be on the exam? Anything that's in the exam objectives could potentially be on the exam. And, well, certainly RAID is one of those topics that we need to know. In fact, there are 4 specific RAID types that are mentioned in the official CompTIA exam objectives. Hey, look, there's 4 specific RAID types here. I'm asking you everything you need to know about RAID right there. So that's one of those, I think, that are really going to help you break down what these 4 might be. And you only have to know 4 of them. There are many other RAID types, obviously, that you would need to know. This one, you only need to know 4, at least for the exam. You might be using different RAID technologies in the arrays that you use in your network. I have different RAID technologies I use on my local network. So it doesn't always have to be just these 4 as an option, but these are probably the 4 most popular, I would think. And a number of the non-standard RAID types often use or borrow from one of these 4 RAID types as well. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, 2 physical drives have failed in a RAID array, but the data in the array is still available to the users. Which of the following is used in this array? Is it RAID 0, RAID 5, RAID 1 plus 0, or RAID 1? You see a lot of people have locked their answers in here. Let's close the poll and see what you chose. 50% say the answer is RAID 1 plus 0. 32% say the answer is RAID 5. 10% say RAID 1. Finally down to single digits with RAID 0 getting 6.5% of the answers. The interesting part of this question, and something that you'll commonly see with RAID, is the reason we create a RAID array, a redundant array of inexpensive or independent disks, depending on the definition that you find. But a redundant array means that if we lose a drive, the system still runs. In this question, we lost 2 drives. How is this still working? How is this still operating? That's something hopefully that is not going to happen to you, but it does sometimes occur. And if this data is extremely important, you will want to use a RAID type that does provide an additional level of redundancy so that you can lose multiple drives and still be up and running. Wouldn't that be nice? Nobody's complaining. You get an alarm and alert. You can swap these drives out and nobody knows that anything ever went wrong. In this particular case, then, we're using RAID, what we call RAID 10, which is often written as RAID 1 plus 0. That's because this is a RAID type that uses both RAID 0, which stripes across different drives, and RAID 1, which mirrors or has a duplicate of an individual drive. So this is a very good explanation or scenario that you would use to be able to keep a system running even if it loses 2 physical drives. So for example, we take a RAID 0 array. This is a RAID 0 where we take we have data. Let's say we have 12 blocks of data. We're going to write part of that data. Block 1 goes to one drive. Block 2 goes to another drive. Block 3 goes to a third drive. And then we just keep duplicating that process. Because in this example, I've got these 3 drives that we are going to use. Now, obviously, we put a little bit of the data on the system, and we have put a little bit of different data across multiple drives. If we lose one of these drives, we're out of business. It stops working because we lost enough data that we can no longer recreate that data from what's left over from the other 2 drives. So in order to add a bit of redundancy, we throw in a little bit of a RAID 1. So we will take these different stripes and we will duplicate these stripes into these. So instead of just writing 1 copy of block 1 and 1 copy of block 2 and 1 copy of block 3, we have a redundant mirrored copy of those same blocks. You can start to see where this can really help you, because let's say we lose one of these drives, we still have a duplicate of it. Now, I said in this particular example that 2 drives failed, but we were still up and running. Only one RAID type can handle that particular scenario. But it's also, and that RAID type is obviously RAID 10 or RAID 1 plus 0. But it's also important to know that it has to be 2 very specific physical drives, because we could lose 2 drives with this RAID configuration on the screen, and we could fail all of our data. We could lose all of the data, because what if the 2 drives that we lost were these first 2 drives, the ones that were mirrored? What if we lost both of these and had the mirror there? That's a little bit of a challenge. That's a little bit of a problem. So we don't want to run into that scenario. But in this example, in this question, we lost 2 drives, but it was still up and running. In fact, in this case, we could have lost 3 drives. Ugh, makes me nervous just thinking about that. We don't want to lose 3 drives. But you could lose 1 from the first mirror, 1 from the second mirror, and 1 from the third mirror, and you'd still be up and running. That's not a great scenario. I'm sorry I even mentioned it. We should do some type of sacrifice, I guess. But that is a scenario, and that's one of the reasons that RAID 10 or RAID 1 plus 0 might be advantageous for your network. If you want to stay up and running and you want to make sure that you're covering practically every scenario, this would be a good way to do it. And at least that might help you. If you run into a scenario where you need to not just lose 1 drive, but lose multiple drives and still be up and running, this RAID type could possibly provide that to you. I think a lot of people would also supplement this. If you were to look at a number of RAID controllers that are out there, many of them also will support additional hot spares in that same system. So if one of these drives was to fail, it would automatically notice the drive failed, and it would start recreating the array on the extra standby drive, the hot drive that we have on that system, so that you don't have to show up on site, pull out the drive, put in a new drive. It can automatically fix itself in that scenario. And there are different RAID types for those specific scenarios. But for what you are doing on your A+ exam, you only need to know one of 4 different RAID types. They would be RAID 0, RAID 5, RAID 1 plus 0, and RAID 1. And there are different advantages and disadvantages for all of these. And of course, I give you a breakdown of what all of those are in my video entitled RAID. Obviously, that's the name of the video, aptly named. It is in the 1101 video series in section 3.3. If you're looking for more information on RAID, that would be a good place to go to get that breakdown of a RAID array. And RAID 1 plus 0 was the right answer, and 50% of you, 50.41% of you, I'm not sure which one of you is the 0.41, but that is the answer we were looking for, and that's the one that gives you that level of redundancy even if you lose 2 different drives. In our scenario, we could have lost 3 different drives to have that there. So that's a number of different things that we could work through. I know we're at the top of the hour, but we have time for another question. This next question, though, I'm going to pull from my practice exams book. My practice exams book is a book that I wrote because I started looking at the practice exams that were out there on the internet. I looked at a number of free sites, and I looked even at practice exams that you could purchase. I just was not happy with the quality and accuracy of the exams that I was running into. A lot of the questions that I found were just wrong. They were poorly written. And in some cases, we're asking questions about topics that are not even on the exam anymore. Why somebody's submitting and publishing that type of material, I have no idea. But I thought, wouldn't it be nice if I had a practice exams book that listed out practice exams that were written specifically with the same tone, the same style, and tried to emulate the similarities of the type of questions you would get in an actual exam. This obviously is not actual exam questions. I write every single one of these questions from scratch, but it gives you a similar style of what you would run into. That way, when you get on the exam and you're reading through these questions that ask you about the best option, the first thing you should do, and you've got a familiarity with the cadence that you can expect, that's something that can help make the exam process a little bit easier for you. So I have for you a question that I pulled directly from my practice exams book. Let's go through this question. This is from my practice exams book. The first set of questions, this question happens to be in exam A, question 46. It's on page 16 of the book. This question, again, please no answers in the chat room. We're going to step through this. This question asks, a user in the manufacturing department reports that every page printed from the central networked laser printer has a single black line extending from the top of the page to the bottom. Which of the following is the most likely cause of this issue? Is it the fuser is damaged, the printer language is not properly configured, the photosensitive drum is damaged, or the toner is low? Those are the four options. Now, this is provided to you in a physical form or a digital form. So obviously the physical book is identical to what you would get. In this case, though, you can see if you just wanted to know whether the answer is A, B, C, or D, you could go to page 31. If you wanted more details, you could go to page 82. And you can, of course, because this is a PDF, you could go through this list and highlight different parts of it. Or if you have a stylus, you could write on the page itself. You can make notes on this particular book. You've got another one of those that you could work through. But I also, because this is a PDF, these sections for quick answers on page 31, you'd have to scroll from page 16 to page 31, or even more challenging, if you wanted a detailed answer page, that's on page 82. I'm on page 16. Can you imagine scrolling through all of that? So instead, I just put hot links in here. So where it says the details, you click that, takes you to page 82. There's your question on page 82, gives you the answers again. The fuser is damaged, the printer language not properly defined, photosensitive drum is damaged, or the toner is low. And it tells you the answer is C, the photosensitive drum is damaged. And like you would probably find in other places, I give you an explanation of why I feel that is the right answer for this particular question. Hopefully it's one that has more detail. Another thing that drives me crazy with some of these questions you see online is that I will often get the question wrong, but it doesn't tell me why I got the question wrong. This is a great opportunity to learn more about the topic and maybe even learn about multiple topics at the same time. We need to close that loop. We need to make this a full educational opportunity. So for every wrong answer in this book, I document why the wrong answer is wrong, so that you're not only learning why the right answer is right and how a fuser is something that would not be correct, but a scratch photosensitive drum might be, but I step through each one of those wrong answers. You're effectively learning about 4 different topics in one single question. So that gives you an opportunity not just to learn why the right answer is right, but on your exam, if the question happens to be about a fuser, you now know more about that particular technology. It's now locked into your brain because you saw it as one of the wrong answers on this particular question. Now, if you know nothing about these topics and you're trying to figure out what are they talking about, fusers and photosensitive drums, I have no idea what this is explaining. I have a link back to my video course. You can either use a QR code if you have the physical book. They are in the book. You can see the QR codes are right in here, so you can use it with your mobile device, your phone, your camera. But these are also hot links as well. So you can click on that link and it will take you to my website, to the page where this particular question is listed in that video. So you can learn more about the technologies and then maybe come back to this question and you'll understand the nomenclature just a little bit better. Now, because this is a PDF, did you know that your PDF reader probably has a back button in it? I can go to the back button and we're back to where we started, and I can go to the next question on my list. So we can just keep that process going all the way through a series of questions that emulate and have a similar style to what you would find on your exam. That is my practice exams book. Those are available both for the Core 1 and the Core 2 exams. And this is something that might help you if you're at that last phase of your study process and you're wondering, am I really ready to take this exam? This might give you some of that feedback that you're looking for. You can learn more about that at professormesser.com/core1pe or follow the main menus on my website for the practice exams for the Core 1 or the Core 2 exam. Well, that is an hour of what we were doing for Q&A. Hopefully that gives you some perspective of what you can study for. If you have not downloaded the official Core 1 and Core 2 exam objectives, this will be a valuable study tool for you. So make sure you grab these from the CompTIA website. They tell you everything you need to know to pass this exam. This is a copy of the PDF that you can download for free from the CompTIA website. They have a bulleted breakdown of every possible thing you need to know. So for example, we had a question earlier about RAID, and that was in section 3.3. So I flipped over to section 3.3 of this, and there's drive configurations here. We need to understand a redundant array of independent or inexpensive disks, and that is known as RAID. And we specifically need to know RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, and RAID 10. So they tell you exactly what you need to know, and it's free. This is the first thing you should read before going through your studies at the very beginning. I also think this is the last thing you should go through because it makes a great checklist before you schedule your exam. This will give you an idea if you really do know every topic you need to know for the exam. And it answers that popular question that I often get is, how do I know if I'm really ready? Well, you grab the objectives, you go through every single one of these objectives, and you see if you can explain the objective to yourself in a mirror, to somebody else who's nearby, who can tolerate you doing this for long periods of time. And hopefully that can give you an idea of whether you really are ready to take the exam. And it's free. If you want a quick link to get there, you can simply go to professormesser.com/objectives, or you can go to your favorite search engine, type in CompTIA Exam Objectives. The first link will take you right to that page. We've gone through an hour so far, but there's more Q&A that we're going to do in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. I'll be answering your questions in the second hour. In the meantime, of course, we have other live streams that are already on the schedule. I mentioned our December 6th, that's our Friday live stream, will be the Core 2 study group. And of course, in December next week, we have our Network Plus and Security Plus. But I've already put the January schedule on the calendar. You can see that we have A+ study groups already scheduled for January the 7th and January the 9th of 2025. Next year, well, a month from now. And then, of course, we have our Network Plus and Security Plus also on the schedule. I'll make sure I add those to our Discord calendar and to our calendar at professormesser.com/calendar, so you will know exactly when the next live event is going to be. Well, we've gone through an hour, but the Q&A is not done yet. In the after show, I'll be taking your questions, sort of turn this whole thing around. Instead of me asking the questions, you are going to ask the questions of me. You can ask anything by going to professormesser.com/QA. Don't forget about our discounted vouchers. They're available on our website. If you happen to be in the U.S., Canada, or a U.S. territory, you can find it at professormesser.com/vouchers. Don't forget about our course notes and our practice exams from the main menu of our site, or you can go directly there by visiting professormesser.com/1101success. And if you want to follow us online, we try to be everywhere we can. You can find that at professormesser.com/Discord, /YouTube, /Twitter, /Instagram, just type in something and see if we happen to be there. We might be there. And if not, let me know, and I'll be sure to get an account going there as well. And if you liked this video, giving it a thumbs up would be a great way to support what we are doing here. My friends over at YouTube like to look at those statistics. And if you'd like to be my best friend forever, you would go to professormesser.com/YouTube and subscribe to our channel. Maybe not best friend, but I'd like you a whole lot. That would be another great thing you could do for us, and it would indeed help us quite a bit. Thank you for being here in this first hour. Stick around for hour number 2, where I'm going to answer your questions. You can ask anything of me, and I really appreciate you being here, answering these questions. Chat room, thank you so much for joining us and being here as well. We will see you next time on the A+ study group. Thanks, everybody. Okay. Let me take a quick sip. It's not really very attractive, is it? Let's now turn the ship around a little bit, and I'm going to have you ask questions of me. You may be saying to yourself, what are you talking about? Well, you can, of course, by using those same links we looked at before, you can submit questions at any time for this study group. I get a list of these questions on my side. They're not going to pop up on the screen as you do it, but they do show up on my side. So you only have to submit it one time, and then I'm going to go through that list. we're going to answer some of the questions that you might have. Follow the link that's on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and we can go through any of the questions that you happen to be submitting. We just looked at my practice exams, for example. We saw some of the things that are available on those practice exams. And I have a question here from Anonymous, who I knew this one was coming because they mentioned it in our Discord. The question is, hello, Professor. I want to know if your practice tests are designed to be retaken. Please advise. I've also been scoring around low to mid 80s on my practice tests. Should I be in a good spot to take the exam? The practice test obviously it's a PDF, it's a book, and you can either get this in a digital PDF form that you could look at online, but it's not really designed to be something that changes over time. It's a book. It does not change. It stays the way it is. And I would, obviously, if you go through a single exam, it doesn't help very much to immediately go back to that first question and go through it at the same time. What you really probably want to do is go through it, figure out the areas where it might be a little more difficult. Maybe you found that you don't know RAID well enough. Maybe you found that there's certain interfaces or port numbers that you haven't memorized. Maybe you should spend time memorizing all of those things. You'll have a list once you go through a single exam in that book. And obviously there are 3 exams in this total book. So that's a lot of questions and a lot of topics to go through. So I would say take the test, then go back, study up on the things that you didn't do well on. And that will, of course, lead into other topics you can work through. And then once you're done with that, you can now step back into the exam. Maybe that's a good time. Once weeks have gone by, you've sort of forgotten the questions that you had before. Maybe now is a good time to go back through the exam and step through the details of that. The second part of that question really talked about what is a good score to be able to use. Well, I have a section inside of the practice exams book that is aptly named How to Use This Book, where I take you through different scenarios on how you can use this book. And we talk about clicking those quick answers or the details, the back buttons that we have, the things that I really just demonstrated for you. But on the second page of this, I have a scoring chart. So if you get 63 to 72 questions correct, which is a 70 to 80%, I think you should probably work a little bit harder to get a little bit better, because 80 to 90% is super good. And this is really where you're trying to focus, is getting those higher numbers, because if you get over 90%, then you're probably ready for the exam. You're not going to have any problem going through the exam and dealing with that. So I think those are good numbers to shoot for. They're not exact numbers. They're really just to give you a feel for where I think a good place might be for you on this exam. But I think that's a very good place that gets you at least an idea of what a good number would be to shoot for. And I think that's an important part of this. If you're ever working on the exam and trying to break out, am I ready? Am I not ready? What should we be working towards? I think those are pretty good numbers to work towards. And again, that's in the very beginning of the book, in the introduction, and it talks about how to use this book. So I would recommend doing that as well. We got a lot to continue through. Again, if you wanted to submit a question, you can go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your questions. Let's keep going through the questions that you have submitted. A number of you have even sent in just comments. Somebody else sent in a comment about passing your Core 1 last week. That was from Anonymous. So Anonymous, congratulations on your latest exam. And thanks for even putting it in there. I love to hear the stories of, I passed my exam. We finally finished this particular phase of our studies. Lets us know that people are getting that particular certification. They're getting through these exams. It's always nice to get that kind of feedback. Let's keep going through this list and see what happens to be here. This is one where there's a number of these. I think this is a good one to even bring up, I think, because this is something that's kind of important for me. One of the things you'll notice in our video course is that every video is closed captioned. This is not closed caption using YouTube's automatic closed captioning function, which quite honestly it's okay, but it's not perfect. And when we're dealing with technical topics like RAID and redundancy and some of these terms that we often will throw out, these automated closed captioning systems simply can't properly understand what we're trying to do. So one of the things you'll notice is that every video of every course is closed captioned, and it's closed captioned by a human. And the way that we do this, there's a service that I use where they watch the video. So they're not just listening, they're watching the video and they see the words that I put on the slide. They see me talking and referencing that information. And so they have human created closed captions that are remarkably accurate. No closed captioning is going to be perfect because these are humans that are typing in this information, but they're much better than what you would get from an automated process. And that's important for me. I have members of my family that have problems hearing. So having some type of closed captioning or ongoing reading, the ability to read this information is super important for me. It is very personal. That's the importance is really there. So I don't mind spending the money to do that. But to do a single course is thousands of dollars that have to be spent to have those people watch the videos, type all of this in, and ultimately get added to YouTube. So there is a significant cost to be able to do that. For a service like this, you're really talking about a lot of money to do a 2-hour live stream on these study groups to be closed captioned. And quite honestly, although our courses are available for 3 years and get a lot of viewers, there's not a good cost justification to be able to do this for our study group. So right now, we don't have a good way to do that. I am relying on the YouTube automated closed captioning to be able to provide that closed captioning functionality. And I think for what we are doing, I think it's pretty good for the study groups. It gets you enough along the way for the study group closed captioning. For our course, though, I'm going to continue to have our courses done by humans. I think that's an important part of this. But the closed captioning for our live streams are done always for this. So that helps too. Let's keep going through this list. This is a question that Will asked, and Will answered himself, but I think we'll bring it up again because Will asks, I can't get over how great your camera setup looks. The problem is really with the subject. The camera would look so much better if someone else was sitting here, but it does look pretty good. And we really have designed the camera and the backgrounds and the video to look as good as we can. There's things we could even do to make it better. And I'm working on those lines. We talked a little bit about this in the pre-show of this live stream. And he says, can you share what you're using to stream? Yes. And in fact, Will found the answer on my site so that he was a little bit ahead of this. There is a link right on the homepage of ProfessorMesser.com, which is a list of what we use in our studio. And this list will go through the mic that I use. A lot of people ask about the mic. I've had even people tell me I'm using it wrong. You're using the wrong mic. They think the mic is a side mount or a side mount. If I talk to the side of this mic, it's very difficult to hear what's going on. This is an in-fed mic from Heil. It's a Heil PR40. It's a great mic. I don't know if I'm going to continue using this mic. I've been playing around with mics lately, but I love this mic. I like the way it sounds, and so that's the one we are using. Also, the camera that we are currently using, a little bit of an older camera, but a great 4K camera, single lens, mirrorless camera from Panasonic. It's their Lumix GH5S. So the camera like 4 or 5 years old at this point. We're getting a little bit old with that one. There are some new features and new cameras I would like to be able to use. So I mentioned in our pre-show that I'm getting another camera in on a rental that I could use, and we're going to try that out this weekend and see how it works, which is kind of nice. And if that gets updated, I will update this page so you'll know what we are using. This is the video switcher that we are currently using, which is a Blackmagic ATEM Television Studio Pro 4K. It's the one that I'm hitting the buttons on. You can probably hear me hitting some of those buttons every now and then. It's a switcher that is right in front of me. This is a self-contained unit. In fact, you can't hear it very well. It does hum a little bit. There are fans inside of it. It makes a little bit of noise. And it also is about 4 or 5 years old at this point too. There are some video features that I want to add and I can't do because this is a little bit older. So there's a newer video switcher that I have. It's actually down here. It's a rack mounted switcher that is in my protected, quiet video switcher box in there. In fact, I wonder if I open this up, I don't know if you can hear that noise when I open it up, but I'll close it back up again. That's the reason it's in that very quiet area, because there's a lot of fans in there. There's a lot of humming. There's a lot of noise, and we don't want that on here. But this is a great link if you wanted to know. And here's the mixer we're using. It's a Axia Core 16. It's really designed for higher end audio than what I'm using, but the higher end is a good thing. I like it to sound as good as possible, but it is also a mixer that I've had now for about 10, maybe over 10 years. It's a great mixer. It's a fantastic mixer. And one of the things that is very nice with this is that it is designed for broadcast radio. So it's got a lot of high-end capabilities. I don't necessarily need a lot of the capabilities that are in there. And quite honestly, some of the standard off-the-shelf Mackie digital mixers these days do everything this can do and then some, because technology has marched on its way. So I think if you're someone who is working their way and trying to set up and get an idea of the things we use, I've listed out other things here like the speakers and the converters and the lights and even the keyboard and the mouse that I use. A lot of people ask about that. They're listed here. In fact, if you click these links, these are affiliate links to Amazon. It actually helps us a little bit if you were to purchase. You pay the same price by following those links, but we get a little bit of a commission from our folks at Amazon. Not something that is incredibly important, but it does help. And then lastly, our Web Presenter 4K. That is how you are seeing the video. You can kind of see it over my shoulder here. This is the output of the video 4K broadcast streaming device from the folks at Blackmagic. I am not sending you 4K though. I'm sending you 1080p. I'm sending you HD signal. Even though this particular device can support sending this out as 4K. The reason I'm not sending it as 4K is that it slows down the process that gets to you. So you may not even realize you're not seeing a direct stream from me. I send a single stream to YouTube, and YouTube sends that stream to all of you after the fact. In fact, they often will re-render it into the format that fits best for the device you happen to be using right now. That takes time to re-render the signal. And a 4K signal is 4 times as much data as an HD signal. So it doesn't necessarily take 4 times the amount of time to do that, but you're seeing this video about 5 to 7 seconds after I send it. So it's very fast at HD. When I up that to 4K, I did this test about a year ago, and the delay was about 20 to 25 seconds. Now, when we're doing our Q&A, where I'm asking you a question, imagine you not even hearing the question until 25 seconds after I've said it. There would be a lot of me talking. I don't think any of us want that. So instead, I pushed it back to HD just so we can keep the interactivity going. Now, occasionally YouTube will update their hardware and their processes behind the scenes. So I will occasionally do some tests and see if it really takes that long, because I would like to send you 4K. I think it would look nicer. Maybe it wouldn't. Maybe it would look worse because you'd see me better. But it would be a way that you'd be able to see what we are doing with the rest of this. And I think that would be an important part of this too, to keep it looking and sounding as good as possible, because I think both of those are important. It needs to sound good. And you can find out all of that on our website, professormesser.com/studio. I always update or try to update that page as much as possible. That's a good place to go if you're wondering, what's he using? What type of mic is that? What type of camera are you using? And if I update these over the next month or two, I will update that list as well. Let's keep going through questions. We got some time here. And I think I'm holding out pretty well. And just then I decided not to hold out very well. More questions that you are sending in. The questions that we have. We talked in the early part of our study group, and let me bring that slide up again, about timing for this exam. The question and the summary that I had for this particular exam is here. There it is. And you can see that the current versions of the exam are the 1101 and the 1102. Now, both of these have to be passed for you to earn your certification. You have to pass both the 1101 exam and pass the 1102 exam. And we estimate both of these will retire in the October-November timeframe of 2025. So we have about a year before these go away. The challenge, though, is you have to pass both exams from the same exam version. This is important from the question that Sebastian asks, which is, let's say that I pass the Core 1, but the current version of the exam, I'm going to change your word here, retires before I take the Core 2. So we get to October, November timeframe, they retire. Those exams are no longer available to take. Sebastian continues, what would happen if then? Do I have to take the entire course again, or do I proceed through taking the second part of the A+ course? Well, CompTIA will tell you on their website that to earn your A+ certification, you must pass both exams from the same exam series. So you can take the 1101 and pass your 1101 and pass the 1102 and you're A+ certified. But if you were to pass the 1101 and then the retirement date hits, it's December of 2025, the 1102 is no longer available. You can't take the other one. So Sebastian's question, he says, do I have to start all over again? Yes, you do. You would have to take 2 exams again. You would have to take the new ones and pass both of the new versions of these exams to become A+ certified. So that's why I always put up on the screen and always mention in these live streams when we expect both of these exams to go away, because you need to think about that time frame once we get a little bit closer to that date. Now, this estimated exam retirement of October, November, we got a year. Now, it takes most people 2 to 3 months to pass a single exam. So you could very easily get through a second exam before this exam series retires. So fortunately, we don't have to worry about retirement dates right now as we sit here in December of 2024. But later on in 2025, as we approach that retirement date, we will have to think about whether we really want to get to that point, whether we really should shift over to a new version or not. This will be a lot more important as we get closer to that date. You will notice that I put estimated exam retirement because CompTIA has not given us an exact date for retirement of the A+ exam yet. They've not quite made that a public thing. So I would recommend you always check back with the CompTIA website. You check back with our website. We always try to duplicate that information on our site as well. I think that will be important as we get closer to that exam date, but we're so far away right now, it's not a problem. Do not worry about exam retirements right now. That's not your concern. It's not something you have to worry about. All you have to do is get both of those done before this time next year, and you'll be just fine. As we get closer to that time frame, I'll start giving you my opinion of when a good time might be to shift gears. And in this case, it might be earlier than you think. There's some interesting things happening with the next series of exams. We'll know more once we get into 2025. We got months before we even get to that point, and there will be an interesting time to get to that. And there's lots that we can talk about once we get to that point. So check in with me around April of 2025. Maybe we'll talk about what the differences are. And then as we get into the summer and into the fall time frames, we can, of course, do that as well. It's an interesting things to do. Let's talk about jobs. And of course, the best question about jobs comes from this individual, Chunky Monkey. Chunky Monkey asks, hello, Professor. I was wondering what type of jobs I can get with just this cert. I'm in the Miami, Florida area. Well, as this happens to be the part of the world where I cut my teeth on technology. As soon as I got my degree in business management, didn't get a technical degree in college. I used to say back in that day, we didn't have computers. We did have computers, but it was not a time where there was as many technology type opportunities for education as there is today. There's still a limited amount today, but we really were limited at that time because it was a long time ago. I'm just saying. So it was a couple of years ago. And so I started my very first technology job out of college was in the Miami, Florida area, technically South Miami, right there on US 1. I worked for a company called AC3. They were just a computer retail storefront right there across the street from South Miami Hospital. And one of the things that was nice about that was that we had really big customers. One of our customers, we had the contract for providing computers and computing equipment to all of the Dade County government. Now it's Miami-Dade County, but at the time it was called Dade County. And we provided them with every computer exclusively through our organization. This was a great opportunity because I was able to learn a lot about technology, but I was also able to learn about all of the different companies in South Florida. And in the South Florida area, there's so many different companies out there. You've got companies dealing with cruise lines. Some of the biggest cruise lines in the world are headquartered in South Florida. And because they're headquartered in South Florida, their data centers and their technology people are in South Florida. You've also got companies that are manufacturing. I worked for an insurance company in South Florida for almost 5-6 years. You've got companies dealing with transportation. You have financial organizations. You have Latin American companies. So if you speak Spanish, you've got other opportunities to work for organizations that have connections to other parts of the world from that central point in Miami. Miami's a great Latin American gateway, great jobs available there. So there's places in South Florida. And then once you get into Broward County and even a little bit into Palm Beach and Boca Raton area, you've got financial organizations, manufacturing, you've got just a lot of opportunity up there. So there are different jobs. I also worked for a third-party call center, an outsourced call center. That was the part of my career where there was a little evil stuck in there somewhere. Obviously, call centers are not the fantastic places to work, but they do have a lot of technology. And I was in charge of the voice and data networks for that organization. And that learned even more about voice over IP technologies, redundancy, wide area networks, data storage, and the challenges in working in an organization where there's a lot of turnover, which is something you don't normally get when you work for an insurance company, you work for a cruise line. There's not a lot of turnover. With a call center, there's a lot of turnover. So I got into those as well. And ultimately started working for companies that were based outside of Miami, where I was their technical representative. So I worked for Network General and took my technologies to all of these different companies in South Florida to see if it was something they might want to buy. And I got to demonstrate the technology, understand everything about packet captures and looking through trace files and understanding how to deploy them and how to have a distributed environment. Amazing technologies. And that led me into the world of security and ultimately into next generation firewalls. So I find South Florida to be a fantastic area for technology. So you're in a good place there. The question was what can I do with just an A+ cert? This is what everybody should do. Doesn't matter where you live, doesn't matter where you're looking for a job. You should go out to your favorite job posting website, go to LinkedIn Jobs, go to Indeed, go to any of those, dice.com, whatever you're using these days in your particular area, in your particular country or geography, and look at the jobs in your area. What are they asking for? And how many of them are asking for an A+? How many are asking for Network Plus? How many are asking for Security Plus or any other certification for that matter? And find out if this particular certification is one that fits best for that organization. Some companies love certs. Some companies don't care about certs. You need to know this before you apply. And you need to understand what type of emphasis do they put on you having that particular credential, whether that is a formal education, got a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree, whether it is a industry certification, A+, Network Plus, a Microsoft, a Cisco, cloud-based, whatever it happens to be. You need to understand if this is something where they want some type of additional experience, maybe something that is on your professional side that you could say you have done working other places. The other part, and I often mention this, I have a video that's in the YouTube video description of this video of how to get a job in IT with no experience. And the fourth element, I mentioned those 3 elements in that video, which is formal education, industry certification, practical experience. The fourth one, we don't talk about very much, really anywhere. The fourth one is you know someone who works there. This is often overlooked. And it's not that you know them intimately, that you grew up with them, that you attended their child's christening, none of those things. This is just a professional acquaintance, someone who knows you, who would recognize you face to face. Maybe you know them from the Microsoft user group meeting. Maybe you met them at a trade show. Maybe they're a neighbor. Maybe you know them from church. Maybe you know them from your kids' soccer team. All of these things are great ways to network with other people. And by simply asking a question, oh, I just got my degree or I just got my A+ certification, looking for a technical job. I heard you work over at that cruise line. Do you know anybody in the IT department? Who should I send my resume to? In fact, that's all you really have to do. And they will say, every time they will say this, I guarantee it. No, you send the resume to me and I will send that into my HR department and to the IT folks. And that's because with most of these very large companies, they have an employee a registration program, a program where they want to recruit people that they know. And so it is a referral program within their company that if you are the one handing the resume, you as the employer handing someone else's resume to HR and they hire that person, you get a bonus. You get some money back on that one. So I always try to tell people, throw the resume line out there in some way, or ask them, do you have an employee referral program that I could give you my resume and you might be able to make a few bucks on that? Because if you stay for 3 months or 6 months or whatever the program is, that person could earn hundreds of dollars. So it becomes really useful to know what that happens to be. So I would highly recommend that you do all of those things. Have a look at what jobs are out there, but also don't discount the things that are outside the scope of technology. Sometimes that can be the difference between you getting that job and you not getting that job, because we want to work with people we know that we can trust, that aren't going to be flaky, that aren't just going to not show up one day. If we have a relationship already with you at this professional level and we've met you and we know we've seen you multiple times, we've talked to you, we might be more comfortable hiring you. And sometimes that can be the big difference. So make sure, even in Miami, make sure that you do that, because that can be a big difference between you getting the job and you not getting the job. Let's do some more questions. Let's keep going through this list. Here's a good one. This one hits a little close to home. What are some of the best study methods that you would suggest for someone with multiple jobs and children? I'm assuming multiple children, because this is in the plural. Multiple jobs and children. This can be a challenge. As someone who has had multiple jobs at the same time, because this thing that we have built was built while I was working full time for another company. Now, we don't do that anymore. This is my full-time gig now. But at the time, I was working during the week for one company and on the weekends and nights doing this with my own equipment, with my own thing, building it up, and eventually, finally deciding to do it full-time. That's a challenge. And then raising 3 kids at the same time. And I got a bunch of dogs and the wife and everything. And everybody needs to be happy. And so it can be a challenge because your day all revolves around waking up in the morning, getting the kids ready to school, getting them out. Maybe you're taking them to school. Maybe you're getting them on the bus. They go to different schools. You got to go to one school first, then go to the other school. Then you need to get to work. You get to work. You do your full day of work. Maybe you're able to get out at lunch and run that one thing you're trying to do. Then you get home and now you're thinking about dinner. You got to get dinner on the table. The kids have homework. That's going to take hours to get through. You get everybody there. Then you got to get the showers, get them in the tub, get them clean, get their pajamas on, get them into the bed, get them asleep. You tell the story, you get them finally sleeping. Everybody's quiet and you are exhausted. You can't keep your eyes open to be able to, and we have to study. There's got to be some type of studying involved. I can't lift a finger. I can't raise my arms. I am beat. So it's a challenge. If you're in that mode of just trying to get life going and continuing and getting everybody the things they need, it can be a challenge. And one of the things, though, is that the pace doesn't really slow down until maybe the kids can dress themselves. It is quite the pace to be able to make something like that happen. And imagine having multiple jobs on top of that. So you're trying to support this entire process. It's when you get to that point, you try to grab the times that you can. So maybe you're in your car driving to work. That's an opportunity to study. Maybe you are able to carve out a little bit of your morning or your day working out. Maybe you get on the treadmill for 30 minutes. That's an opportunity to study. Maybe you decide I could probably get up 30 minutes early and just spend 30 minutes going through a section of this book. Watch 30 minutes of a video or even less. That's one of the reasons you'll notice that in my course, I don't have these hour-long videos. These are hours long. These are 2-hour-long video courses or study groups, but these are a little bit different. We approach study groups differently than we do our course. You'll notice our course, I shoot for a 10-minute video. Sometimes it's less than that. Sometimes it's more than that, but it's certainly not an hour. It's not even 30 minutes. So if you have 15 minutes, you might be able to watch one of my videos. And maybe getting up 15 minutes earlier, something you can do. At that point, it's more about commitment. It's about being able to at least get enough sleep. And then on top of that, add in the additional things you need to do. It's a challenge. There's no good answer for that one, by the way. There's no magic wand I can say, and this will allow you with all of the children and the things that you have to do to be able to do this. This may be one of those where the weekend is really the difference, because hopefully your weekend slows down a little bit. Not everybody's does. Maybe the weekend that's when we do soccer. That's when they do, we do the baseball stuff. And sometimes we got to go out of town to do these sporting events. Maybe they're in a dance troupe and maybe they're cheerleading. There's all these things that are important. We need to make sure we're able to do those, but we also have to find a way to fit in. And maybe we be more creative. Maybe we bring the kids in to ask us questions. Maybe they're the ones giving us the Q&A while we're driving somewhere in the car. Be creative. Try to find different ways to do it. Perhaps ultimately you'll find the right niche for your cycle of chaos that you have. It certainly is one that is challenging and it's not easy. But if you have a goal and you're thinking about where to go with this, you will be able to find the time. Maybe it's not going to take you 2 months to get through the course, though. Maybe it takes 3 months. Maybe it takes 4. Maybe it takes 6 months. I'm a 6-month person. To get through a single course and take a certification exam is not something I can do quickly. I have other responsibilities too. So 6 months I'm fine with. Don't kill yourself worrying and thinking that you're taking too long. It takes however long it takes. And if 6 months is the right time, that's what the right time is. I don't get all upset about it. I just say it's going to take me 6 months. And that's just how it's going to go. I will carve out this time. I will have a process and I will just stick to that process. And however long it takes is however long it takes, because I can't always plan the chaos. The chaos happens, and I kind of fit in what I can do whenever I can do it. And I think if you follow that and not worry so much about time, and you worry more about fitting in the schedule when you can, I think you'll be okay. Hopefully that's given you at least some ideas. There's no easy button, unfortunately, on that one, I can tell you about. It is a challenge. It's a struggle, and you will figure it out. You just have to be a little creative and figure out what's important, how you can move things around and get that extra time wherever it happens to be. I often said, we need a book that is laminated that I can read in the shower. That's the time I have to myself. I can fit in another 5 minutes, but then I'm out of hot water. What good is that? More questions. Let's keep going down this list. Let's see if there is, well, here's one. I'm going to take this one because I think it's one that we can use, kind of fill in the blank for a lot of things. This is from Brooke, who asks, "Hi, Professor. I was wondering if Linux bash command questions are something that's included in the exam." This is a good question because you can fill in the blank here. I get a lot of emails and a lot of direct messages on Discord, and a lot of them have this same question, but it's a different topic. They'll say, "Hi, Professor, I was wondering if Windows recovery questions are something that's included on the exam. I was wondering if port numbers are something that's included on the exam." And so there are absolutely places you could go to know exactly what is on the exam. And that's why one of the things that I told you about earlier was the exam objectives. So the exam objectives give you a breakdown, step by step, bullet by bullet, of everything that could possibly be asked of you on the exam. Now, obviously, there are hundreds of bullets in here. They can't ask you all of the topics that are in this list of exam objectives. And the way that most of these industry certification exams work is they give you all of this information, and then you have to learn it all, and then your question on a percentage of it, a fraction of this ends up being questions that end up on the exam. That's just the way it works. Now, this question asked specifically, we'll talk about this one specifically, talked about bash, talked about the Linux shell. So I am going to pop open another set of exam objectives, because the one I've been showing you so far are the 1101 objectives, but I will also want to show you the 1102 objectives, because that's where operating systems happen to be. The format is the same. In fact, this looks the same as what we were looking at before, except you can see here that it says, this one actually has a typo on the front page. I don't think you noticed it. Exam number Core 1 to 2011-02. Now it says Core 2. It's the Core 2. They forgot to change the 1 to a 2. So don't be thrown by that. This is the Core 2 objectives. And one of the things that's here is a breakdown of things like, given a scenario, use the appropriate Microsoft command line tool. And you see a number of these commands that you would find in any version of Windows. So you have the ping command, the nslookup, the traceRT, the gp update. These are Windows commands and what you would find. But also in the same section, this is section 1 of the 1102, the Core 2 exam. If you go to section 1.11, identify common features and tools of the Linux client/desktop OS. These are all Linux commands that you would run at a shell in Linux. It can be bash or other shells. And these are the commands you need to know. So things like rm and chown and man and top and dig and nano. These are Linux-ish type commands. These are also commands you can run in Mac OS. So this one also applies to the Mac OS side. So if it's in this set of exam objectives, then you need to know it. And certainly this question, as it was posed, asked specifically, will Linux bash command questions on the exam? Well, we had a bunch of different commands in Linux. You could be asked about any of those on the exam. You should absolutely know them. Make sure you are familiar with them. It will be an important part because there's so many there. There's probably a pretty good chance you might get one of them showing up on your exam. Won't get all of them. There's too many there to ask every single command, but you could certainly see them as different options in an answer. They might ask you a question and say, which of these commands would you use? this one, this one, this one, or this one. Well, there's 4 commands I need to know because I need to be able to compare and contrast each of those. So, yep, you need to understand all of them. And in my course, I demonstrate them. I show them to you. We run them interactively. You're able to see this, and I do them in a way that you could run them that way as well. So I don't use anything that's private or IP addresses you wouldn't know about. You can do everything from there. Makes sense. Let's keep going through this list. Next on our list, and being able to work through. Thank you, by the way, for sending in all of these questions. Allows me to kind of step through and see what you're thinking about, see if we can approach all of this, because sometimes I see multiple questions show up. I like to do those because more than one person would be asking about those. Let's keep going through all of these. Let's talk about this one. This question comes up a bit, but I have a different perspective, I think, than most. The question asks, how can earning the A+ certification help lay a solid foundation for transitioning into cybersecurity? And what additional certification or skills should I focus on next? Let's approach this one by first, I'm going to define for you what cybersecurity is, because quite honestly, it's not a real word. It doesn't mean anything. There's no standard definition for what that is. And the way that I'm going to interpret it for this particular question is IT security. Cybersecurity is a very broad term that applies across every possible technology and scope of technology and how security is affected by that. But for our purposes and how we are focusing on these topics, we're going to consider cybersecurity to be IT security, information technology security. This is a group of people in an organization that is responsible for protecting the people, the devices, and the data of your organization. So they're the ones in charge of making sure the authentication process is secure. They're implementing multi-factor authentication. They're configuring and setting up your VPN connectivity. They are configuring your next generation firewalls with appropriate security rules. They are enabling the intrusion prevention capabilities and setting up any type of content filtering. They may be doing malware detection and recovery from malware if it occurs. They may also be setting up your IPsec VPN connections between different sites. And they might also be in charge of maintaining your certificates for your organization and even more things. There's plenty more those folks end up doing. So this is a group of folks in any organization that is critical to making sure that all of your data is safe. Now, how can you prepare for a position in a world of IT security? One of the things that I think a lot of folks may not realize, and it's an important thing to consider, is that there are not a lot of entry-level jobs in IT security. And by this, I mean your first foray, your first position into IT security is not commonly your first job in IT. Your first job in IT tends to be in a break-fix type position, help desk, service desk, or something lower level dealing with operating systems and hardware. Then you might also add into this mix networking knowledge. In fact, some of the things that I just mentioned to you, things like setting up your VPN connectivity, configuring your firewalls, which include routing, NATing, and other networking requirements like redundancy, and being able to connect IPsec VPNs and even connect to VPNs for other partners of your organization, third parties. Those are skills and a set of knowledge that you accumulate over a period of time. And you need that as a base foundation to get into the world of IT security. So you can't just jump out of college into an IT security position because you don't know anything about operating systems yet. You haven't configured and set up an Active Directory implementation. You haven't worked enough with networks to become an expert in networking, TCP/IP, and being able to understand how any of this would work. You have never even read a packet capture at this point. So the first job you would be eligible for in the world of IT security needs that foundation. That's what I mean by there's no entry-level positions in IT security. There are obviously starting places And entry level in IT security is different than entry level in IT. You can think of it that way. And so you need to consider building your foundation. How can you get as much knowledge as you can and become an expert in understanding operating systems, Linux, Windows, Mac OS, mobile operating systems, iOS and Android? We also need to understand about networking, getting an understanding of IP version 4, IP version 6, TCP, UDP, and how all of these technologies work over the network. What is switching? What is routing? What about wireless? What about the bridging part? What about network address translation? How do I handle different routing scenarios and different routing protocols in different parts of the network, route redistribution? How do I set up redundancy on an IP network where redundancy normally would not exist? You have to know that before you can secure it. And so that's why I mention to people all the time, it's good to have a scope of where to get to with IT security. You want to be able to work in a job in security. You need to build a pathway to get to that point. And so if I was building a pathway for you, I would tell you to start with operating systems, learn as much as you can about Windows and Linux and anything else you can, understand the security for those operating systems. Security is really something that every part of IT has to focus on. Whether you are managing a data center, managing an operating system, managing the user devices, security is part of your role anyway. But if you want to focus on IT security side of things, you need to build up to that. Once you get operating systems done, move into networking. Learn as much as you can about networks. Understand exactly how TCP works. Understand the requirements for routing, understand dynamic routing protocols and how they operate, understand how the internet is connected to each other, understand how your network is connected to each other. How would you connect all of these switches? What about VLANs? What about .1Q? What about making sure the core router and switch are working properly? Or how do they connect to each other? How do we even plug all of these VPNs and connections into each other? All of these questions are good ones to know. And unless you have a foundation in networking, you're not going to be able to get past that point. So build the foundation. Once you have an expertise in operating systems and you have built an expertise in networking, you are now ready to move into IT security. I think that's a good path. Now, there are shortcuts. There are other positions. And in fact, you might be able to find a lower level IT position in the world of security, depending on your geography. I've mentioned in other study groups, for example, about a SOC, a Security Operations Center, SOC. That's the SOC I'm referring to. Many organizations have a NOC, a Network Operations Center, where it's a room and a group of people that make sure the networks stay up and running. It's network professionals doing networking things. Maybe that's your step before getting into security. But in larger organizations, they also have a SOC, a Security Operations Center. They take all of the tickets and all of the calls associated with security issues. And they're often in organizations that are that large. They're often entry-level positions. Think of it as the help desk, but for security. They have positions like that. So you might be able to fit yourself into a position that you could grow with that has a focus on security, even though you're not quite an expert on security yet. So you have some ideas. You have some options available that if you are able to find them in your particular area, in your particular geography, you might want to look at those as well. This is another place where it's really good to know people that work there. If you know somebody that works in the SOC, go talk to them. How can I get a job there? How can I get into the process there of that world of IT security and being able to move up within those ranks? And they'll give you some very pointed feedback and tell you, you need this, you need this, you need this certification, you need this knowledge, you need this training, you need this experience. And then you'll know what strategy you can put together to gather all of those things and finally be prepared to move into that particular role that deals with IT security. It's an exciting role. My path took me, I started in, as I mentioned, working in Miami at a computer company, literally a computer reseller. We didn't really do much more than that. It wasn't like we were a value-added reseller or a VAR. We were simply a computer reseller. And if the department of whatever in Dade County wanted a computer, they bought it from us. And part of our contract was somebody would come out and set it up. That was me. And if something wasn't working right and it needed a warranty exchange, somebody needed to come out and swap out a hard drive, swap out the memory. That was me. So if somebody needed to be that field service technician, that's what I did. That was my first job in IT, if you want to call it that. One of our customers was a insurance company in Miami, right there at the Miami airport, those big black buildings there. And that was one that was amazing. I stayed there about 6 or 7 years because we had amazing technology and we were building out networks, and I got to grow within that company. Started on the service desk, which is what we called our help desk, moved into workstation management, which was setting up and making sure that users' computers were working properly. You're making sure Windows was set up and connecting to the network, and you were managing the updates to those operating systems. From there, it was easy to move into the world of servers because server operating systems are simply a larger version of the user workstation operating systems. So we moved into the network side and understanding how to manage servers. So I did server administration, which of course, although servers were connected on our network, there was a need to understand the network. And I became an expert in the network side of things. It's a lot of hard work and study to understand protocols at that point. But having a protocol analyzer, I think, is the best way to learn networking because you're watching what happens at the network level. You're seeing that secret language, the protocols that are being sent back and forth over the wire. If you've never downloaded Wireshark, captured some traffic and looked through it, this should be the impetus that gives you the need to be able to do that. You'll know everything about the network because you see everything happening on the network. It's amazing technology. And that is, I think, if you become an expert in protocol analysis, you become now an expert in everything networking because you really understand the language of the network and how it communicates back and forth. Not an easy thing. Simple for me to say. Takes years to be able to become an expert in that particular line. And then, now that I understood how networks operate, it's a simple step up to understand how firewalls work. And that's how I was able to move from the network side of things and took a position with Palo Alto Networks as a systems engineer and got into the world of cybersecurity, of IT security, in the world of next generation firewalls. And that's where I really got into security. I knew a lot at that point, but once you start working directly with next-gen firewalls and that technology and plugging into I got to visit the largest companies in the world. If there's a big logo out there, I was probably on their network at some point plugging in the Southeast United States. So that's a good example of how you can leverage and build the foundation that you can then leverage into a world of IT security. My path is not typical. No one's is. There's no direct line. You're not on a rail. You have to do this and this and this, and then you can be in IT security. It doesn't quite work that way. But everybody follows a different path because every organization is looking for a different thing. And if you know what they're looking for, you can build a strategy for getting there. This is a strategy that will probably take you a number of months or even years to finally execute on and get to that point. And in the middle of that, life happens and you end up moving, or you end up having another kid, or you have these things that happen, or you get another job, or the path changes all the time, but you just adjust. You know, if you just figure out, okay, we had to change where we are. So let's see now what path we would take to get from here to there. Maybe it's the same path. Maybe we modify it a little bit. My path was a multi-step, multi-company path that ultimately got me to where I wanted to be. And in some cases where I was not expecting. The position with Palo Alto Networks, for example, was not one I was looking for. Someone I had worked with in the past contacted me directly and said, I just interviewed with these people and they're amazing. Wouldn't you like to come over and work with them? And they're doing next generation firewalls. And my response was, what's a next generation firewall? Because at that point, the world had never heard of one. And he said, oh, you got to see it there. And I just happened to be at a trade show where they had these the following week, stopped by their booth, and the rest is history. You never know how these things apply. But if you build the foundation and you have everything that's there ready to go, I stepped into a series of interviews with this company, and I had the foundation there to talk about what we were doing. I had the foundation there. At that point, I had done things in my career. I had already been working on writing content. I wrote a book on Nmap. We got to talk about port scanning and the capabilities of that particular tool, talk about other security issues, things that I would know about. There's obviously a world of things I did not know about, but that's something you learn once you get into that next position. So I would say one of the best things you can do is simply create a plan in your mind. It can be a very broad plan. It doesn't have to be specific. I need to get this job on this date and this time. No. You just need to be able to get to that point. And then around you, the world continues to operate. You go to trade shows, you go to user group meetings, you meet other people, and suddenly you hear about an open position. I'm going to put myself in for that one. Let's see if that's something they would want me to do. And then you continue leveling up in your career and building the foundation. I think that's one of the most important things you can do for getting to the point where you can finally apply for some of those IT security positions and really be qualified for them. I think all of this is, you have to think about it. You have to plan it. You have to understand yourself where your shortcomings might be and be able to create a plan on how to get around those shortcomings. Maybe this is something that is going to take years to do. Maybe this is something that you're able to move right into the next level. Maybe you even realize, I've been sitting here way too long. I need to already level up. And this may be what gets you to that level, is building the strategy. Then at least you know what to do. You've talked with your family. You understand what the next steps are. You're all on board with what needs to happen. Now you just need to put it into action. And now you bide your time. You keep learning. And that's one thing about IT that is a universal truth, is you never stop learning. You don't just get your A+ cert and you're done. All right, got my certs. Guess I'm finished learning stuff now. Nope. With IT, you will never stop reading. You will never stop learning. You'll never stop watching YouTube videos. There will always be a technology you need to learn about. There will always be something new coming down the line that nobody knows about yet that you now need to learn about. And if you find the right niche at the right time with the right company, everything fits together perfectly. And now you end up in a place you might not have even realized that you were moving into. That's certainly the way it happened with me. And it's certainly the way that can happen with you. There's nothing special that I did that got me into that other than building the foundation and looking for the right opportunity. Sometimes that's all it takes, but it takes a little bit of work on your side to get to that point. It takes a lot of work on your side to get to that point. But as long as you put together the strategy, you'll be able to look back years from now and think, well, that wasn't so bad. It was a lot of work. We had to put together the plan and get to this point, but now we've got the foundation. And now we can move into the world of IT security. That's what I would recommend for you. That's what I hope for you. That's what I think would be fantastic for you. And if that's what you want to do, there's plenty of opportunity out there for you. This particular market of just IT and IT security and networking and everything surrounding technology is not going to get smaller. This world gets bigger. And there's always going to be opportunities. You just need to be ready when that opportunity comes for you. Well, I think that's a great place that we could work on stopping for this study group. I went a little bit over time. I hope that's okay with everyone. Thank you so much for being here in this first hour. We love doing these study groups, getting the questions ready for you. I think sometimes I modify the questions to make them harder. Sometimes I make them easier. Most of the time, make them harder. Hopefully it's something you can enjoy as we sit through it. We do one of these for Core 1 every month and one of these for Core 2 every month. So if you would like to come back on Friday, we have our Core 2 study group, same time, 12 noon Eastern time. And of course, the replays will be available after that. Next week, we've got our Network Plus and Security Plus as well. There's a lot of things happening this month. It's the end of the year. We're very excited with the things that are going to be happening. It's been a fantastic year. We're going to keep this party going into 2025. We hope you're there to enjoy it with us. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Thanks, everybody.